I can't tell you the kind of reaction I had when I heard Razer of all companies was making a phone. How small-minded of me, I didn't even give it a chance. It wasn't until my phone died for the third time, LG, that I started looking around, and to my surprise, a few subscribers told me to give the Razer phone a look. And guys, holy hell. After researching for a few months, I finally picked it up, and after owning it for a few months, I think there are a few things about this phone that you guys should know. First things first, this phone was marketed towards gamers. Razer said that it wasn't a gaming phone, but a phone for gamers, and they definitely delivered a ton of really cool features that I, especially as a PC gamer, am super into. Like the hardware. This phone packs the Snapdragon 835, which is an octa-core processor running up to 2.45 GHz, and the Adreno 540 graphics processor, which is one of Qualcomm's fastest mobile GPUs to date. The phone also sports a whopping 8 full gigabytes of RAM and 64 gigabytes of internal storage. When it comes to specs, this thing's a powerhouse. Now you may be wondering what all that power goes to, and that would be the 5.7-inch 1440p 120Hz display. Yes, this screen actually runs at 120Hz, and I cannot even begin to tell you how amazing this feels. When people ask me what's so great about this phone, all I have to do is hand it to them for 5 seconds and they get it. The phone is so fast, and scrolling through articles or apps feels a whole lot better on this screen. Now, yes, it is an IPS display, and I have heard people legitimately say that because it's not OLED, that's a deal breaker for them, which is a bit silly if you ask me. The colors on this phone are very rich, with blacks looking black and whites looking white, and unless I'm really looking for it, I sincerely wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Now you can lower the refresh rate from 120 to 90 and even down to 60 Hz, and I figured maybe the 120 Hz refresh rate was a battery killer. Boy was I wrong. This phone houses a 4000 mAh battery, and I cannot stress how long that lasts. Even at 120 Hz, which I'll never change, this phone lasts me at least 2 days before I have to charge it, and I've had it for almost 3 months now. It charges exceptionally fast too, with the average duration being about an hour or two to complete, depending on how low you let the battery get. And you may be thinking maybe I don't use the phone a lot, but I actually do get a lot of screen on time. Now, one thing I was worried about when I got this phone was it getting too hot. With specs like these, you know the phone's going to be an oven, and I can't believe the attention to detail, but Razer thought of this too. The entire phone is made of metal, with the back of it acting as a heat spreader for the internals. I've done temperature tests after pushing the phone a bit, and though the back was hot, the internals were at very reasonable temperatures. I was quite impressed. Now, besides the screen, there are a few other aspects of this phone that really blew me away. The first of which being the speakers. I can't believe how loud these speakers are, but not even that, how great they sound even at max volume. I actually have mobile speakers that I used to use that don't even compare to the quality and output that these speakers do. When I'm hanging out with friends and we want to listen to music, we just set this on the table and we use it as our speaker. It's that good.
Dreams I walked alone, narrow streets of cobblestone, neath the halo of a street lamp, I turned my collar to the cold and damp.
The phone also comes with absolutely no bloatware, or so they advertised, which made me very happy. I can't tell you how many hours I spent looking for ways to delete NFL Mobile on all my other phones. However, they do pre-install Netflix on this phone, which wasn't a huge deal, but does count as bloatware since you can't delete it. Another app they integrated in, however, was Nova Launcher. If you're not familiar with Nova Launcher, it's pretty much the best thing ever, allowing you to basically customize any aspect of the Android OS. Do you like the way LG allows you to tap the screen to turn the phone on and off? Nova Launcher lets you do that. Do you like pinching the screen to open your favorite application? Nova Launcher has you covered. And this app went for $4.99 when this phone was released. It was just really cool of Razer to absorb that price so its consumers could have access to that right out of the gate. Another thing PC gamers especially like is customization, so this was a big win in my opinion. Other things I don't necessarily love about this phone but are worth mentioning are the fingerprint reader and the volume buttons. I've heard people say that these buttons are too mushy, but compared to my last two phones, these were much more tactile than I'm used to, so I'm good with them. The fingerprint reader is very fast and allows you to add up to 5 different fingers with which you can use to unlock your phone. It does regularly ask me to put in a PIN number for extra safety though, which is kind of annoying since I set up the phone to use the fingerprint reader, but it's not a huge downfall. The last thing you need to know before we move on to the cons is the cell providers. See, there are two types of cell provider, those who use CDMA towers and those who use GSM. In the US, providers like Sprint, Verizon, and US Cellular use CDMA, while providers like AT&T and T-Mobile use GSM. The Razer phone is not carried by any CDMA providers, and before I got this phone, I was on a Verizon family plan. This was kind of the hardest choice for me as I'd have to join a network that I didn't necessarily like, but then I realized that I could use Straight Talk and I went through them. In the long run, this made me a lot happier as I'm no longer supporting Verizon. After their whole mix-up and the removal of net neutrality, I'm really happy that I'm not under them anymore, and this certain con turned into a huge pro for me. However, one big issue with that is because carriers don't support this phone in store, you do have to go through Razer, and $744 is a lot of money. Fortunately though, they do have a payoff plan for those who can't just throw almost $750 at a phone all at once, so keep that in mind. Now let's talk about the cons. There are a few with this phone, and even a potential deal breaker for a couple of you. Now, I know what makes and breaks a phone is different for everyone. For some people, it's an OLED screen. For others, it's not having a headphone jack, which is very understandable, and I hate that that's a trend now. When it comes to this phone, the first annoying thing is the vibration motor within. It's horrible and makes a noise like it's rubbing up against something in the phone. And I'm not the only person to notice this either. It seems that everyone who bought this phone hears the same thing, and though it's really only noticeable when you're getting a call, it's still an ear sore. I just turn off the vibrate when someone calls me because as far as texts go, it never vibrates enough to be a problem. The second con is the headphone jack. Now I'm gonna rant here a bit, but I hate that this is normal. Apple started this stupid remove features to make more money idea and everyone else seems to have followed along. No, I'm not gonna buy your stupid Bluetooth alternative. Audio through a jack will always sound better than audio through air. I'm sorry, that's just fact, and screw you, Razer, for following suit with that. Now, I get it. Bluetooth headphones are really cool, and having the option to buy them is awesome. Trying to force me into them, not cool, and doesn't make me inclined to be your sheep. I'm especially annoyed that Razer marketed this phone towards gamers and spoke about options and customization, and then dropped the ball with this aspect. I've seen the internals of the phone, I've watched people open it up, and I know they could have added a headphone jack, and it's just really disappointing. Razer is really lucky that the speakers are as good as they are, because had they been average, this would have been a really big problem for me. This moves us over to the camera, which has been a huge complaint by many, and I can certainly agree. The pictures are good on this phone, but they aren't great. I've heard that this phone has a pretty decent lens, and it's the software that holds it back, and I can definitely see that. I do have to give them a lot of slack though, being that this is their first year making a cell phone, and honestly, the pictures aren't awful in the slightest. They're just not as good as other phones that came out. Another thing too with the camera, and this solely has to do with Snapchat, but the camera zooms in a lot. I have no idea what kind of bug this is, but it's been there since I got the phone, so Snapchat, fix this please? The last con is kind of minimal, but the auto brightness is really dumb. Actually, that's kind of misleading. You see, this phone doesn't have auto brightness. What it does have is adaptive brightness, so if your brightness is set to medium and you're in a dark room, the phone will adapt the brightness to suit the room, but it won't adjust the brightness level. Let me just show you. Here's the adaptive brightness on, and here it is off. It's technically an auto brightness, but it doesn't actually adjust the brightness bar. It's just kind of weird. In all, I really like this phone. It's easily my favorite phone that I've had so far. It offers me a lot of customization, lasts me a million years without a charge, blows me away with its powerful speakers, and keeps me entertained with a 120Hz display, which I'll never get over, and I already know that when it comes time to upgrade, it's going to be really hard going back to a phone with only a 60Hz display. But I'm not super worried about longevity, as Razer themselves promised at least 2 years worth of updates, with one of them being an update to 8.1 Oreo. I do have to call the name into question though. Razer always likes to go a bit overboard with their names, like the Death Adder, the Chroma, the Razer Blade, but they just went with the Razer phone on this one. And it's not a bad thing, it's just oddly out of character. Though it did make it a bit difficult for me as I was trying to see if anyone was carrying this phone. I no joke walked into my local Verizon store and asked if they carried the Razer phone, to which they promptly said they had a few in the back, and when they came back, they handed me the Motorola Droid Razer. Good lord, remember that thing? In all though, if you're looking for a phone, you gotta know why you're buying it. Are you the kind of person who makes decisions based on research and the phone's specs? Or are you a brand buyer and only go for big names? Me, I'm a little bit of both. Don't get me wrong, I'm no sheep for any corporation, but when it came to the Razer phone,